Hello and welcome to episode 151 of the Balanced Approach podcast. I'm your host, Louis Padian. Today we'll be discussing how stress makes weight loss harder, how it can be linked to weight gain, but most importantly, what you can do about it. So I want to start off with a bit of a reality check. Modern world, everyone's got stress. Stress is constant, stress is chronic, and that's something we'll be touching on in a second. But it comes from all angles. We've got work, we've got family, we've got money, health issues, and it's not something that just crops up occasionally. Like I said, it's chronic and it's coming from lots of different angles. So this is a real important realization when I sit down and speak to people about making healthy changes, and people talk me through their weeks or what the plan is, and they'll usually forget or plan a week where there's no real stress or life doesn't happen. And that's where it's my job really to challenge people and sort of see what's going on in people's lives and see what's realistic, because if we set ourselves up to unrealistic standards, then we're only going to beat ourselves up when we don't quite meet them. So actually starting with something that's realistic can be really important. Stress is a part of that. There's lots of complicated emotions associated with it. There's overwhelm from just being chronically stressed. There's frustrations when you notice you're repeating cycles of building yourselves up, tripping up, maybe overeating, emotional eating, and feeling that you're stuck in this cycle of starting a diet on Monday or starting a different diet every couple of weeks, trying to go, well, this is the magic solution. Well, actually, we need to understand your current situation and manage stress as well. And just there's a lot of shame associated with not being able to handle it, not even addressing it, and people just beat themselves up when it's actually not their fault. So today we'll be chatting through how stress, hormones, sleep, behavior, and appetite are all sort of interrelated, and how they all sort of link into that weight gain and how they make weight loss a bit harder, why our bodies aren't built for modern stress, how I'd phrase it, and also a sort of bit of an action plan around realistic sort of plan on what I'd recommend, or someone working who is chronically stressed or someone who has high stress levels, how I'd implement some changes, and they might be quite surprising to you. So your body is built for stress, but not modern day stress. And when we talk about modern day stress, we're talking about the chronic levels that are coming at you from all angles. So if we dial it back and talk about sort of a brief view into the physiological aspects of this, that we have something called the HBA axis. And when we're stressed, the brain signals to the adrenal glands to release stress hormones. And that primes your body for almost like a fight or flight, which is great for short-term survival. And the way that I always frame it is that if you hear a suspicious sound coming from the bush when you're a hunter-gatherer, then that fight or flight is triggered, and it makes you more aware, makes you more alert, more ready for action. And that fight or flight action is really, really useful there. Problem is, when we're talking about in modern day context, we don't have these we don't have a lot of these extreme examples, and things that are causing stress are triggering this fight or flight response when really they're not that dangerous or they're not life-threatening in that moment, but we want immediate sort of action, and our body's primed for that. So like I said, it's not really like a one-off thing that pops up over time, stress for people. It's something that is chronic. There's deadlines, there's emails, there's caregiving, there's money worries. And instead of you having a chance to act on this severe stress that is life or death and acting appropriately, you've got a chronically elevated baseline level of stress. And we're constantly looking for something to help resolve that, a better coping mechanism. And often that can mean leaning into food, it can mean self-soothing with food, it could mean leaning into sort of problematic behaviors around substances. So this is where it makes long-term sort of sustainable habits in the moment. When you're chronically stressed, you're not thinking about the long-term, you're thinking about the here and now and managing that really stressful and how it's triggering you. And that's not really collaborative with us trying to lose weight long-term. So the research around this is really, really interesting and probably won't be surprising for you, but reviews around chronic psychological stress associated with higher rates of abdominal obesity, so storing weight specifically around your midsection, metabolic syndrome, which is a combination of health conditions, which is quite damaging. I'm not sure whether I've covered it before. It's something I've done a lot of reading on. If not, I'll do an episode on it, where we've got high blood pressure, we've got high blood glucose levels, excess body fat, especially around the midsections, around the organs, and potentially elevated cholesterol levels as well. And instead of them just being additional elements of risk, they're exponential levels of risk. So having a combination of them is more than just the sum of its parts. And when people are chronically stressed, they are potentially more sensitive to this as well. And that increases their risk of storing body fat around the midsection and increased risk of metabolic syndrome, which has poor health outcomes long term. So let's jump into hormones, sleep, and appetite. Again, these are all sort of dotted around, but hopefully you'll be able to connect the dots along with me. That we've got stress, we've got cortisol levels, which is one that we sort of generalize as sort of the stress hormone, and your appetite are also interlinked. So if you're chronically stressed, many people who are chronically stressed experience higher appetite and increased cravings for foods that are potentially highly palatable, which means they're high in carbohydrates, high in fats, high in salt, low in nutrients, low in water, quite easy to overconsume and quite calorie dense. So that's a recipe for disaster. If you're chronically stressed, people are driven towards those foods. So it isn't necessarily that they are consciously making these decisions all the time, but their body is geared towards getting those foods. And they, alongside us, are more prone to storing that body fat around the midsection as well. So again, excess body fat is gained quite easily. And when we look at where body fat is distributed, it's particularly problematic around the midsection. And that's why potentially BMI might not be the most useful, and we might use it in combination with something like a waist circumference or hip to waist or hip to height ratio, because where we store body fat is probably just as important as the amount of body fat that we have as well, or it's an important thing to consider. Then we knock in sleep as well, which is something that you probably know that is really, really important, and something that I harp on about, and I'll be touching on again in a couple of episodes' time. But stress will disrupt sleep, and poor sleep quality is linked with higher ghrelin, so high levels of hunger, lower leptin levels, so lower levels of fullness, and stronger reward sensory experiences within the brain. So you are more driven for those highly palatable foods again the next day. So not only is the stress doing that, but the poor sleep caused by the stress is going to be doing that as well. And this is just a recipe for increased weight gain, especially as we know that energy levels after poor sleep drop down and you are less likely to move. So again, if you're looking at something that is driving a lot of people's weight gain, stress is probably a big part of that. The research around this is pretty concrete, that consistently poor sleep is associated with higher energy intake from those highly palatable foods, but also increased obesity and poorer health outcomes long term, especially around shift work as well. So there's lots of things to consider there. Then we link in emotional eating, and then potentially some problematic cognitive processes that are going on here, or beliefs that people hold, or traits that people hold. And this is where people are using food to cope with these high levels of stress, whether they're feeling frustrated, they're feeling exhausted, they're feeling sad, they are overworked, and they have got money worries, and they are trying to distract themselves or self-soothe with food. Again, they are probably poorly slept, and this is probably true for a lot of people. Poorly slept, overworked, they are really stressed, and all those things are driving us towards those highly palatable, really calorie-dense foods. We are less likely to move, and we're going to be stuck in this cycle, really. And what we only feel is the way out of this is extreme restriction, which a lot of people turn to. So that's where you might go, well, I just need to do a detox, or maybe I need to do that 75 hard, or I need to go keto to cut out the foods that I'm overeating on. That doesn't solve the root problem, which a lot of the time is stress, or our ability to manage stress. So this is where we need to look at our coping mechanisms as well. We need to address the factors that are potentially causing us stress, and looking at what's avoidable, what's manageable, and what's unavoidable. Then we need to look at how people are going to manage long term as well. And the research around emotional eating is pretty concrete. And again, I've probably discussed this as well, but it often leads to uncontrolled eating, and it's a risk factor for being overweight, for obesity in general, and recurrent cyclical weight gain long term. Then we look in perfectionist as well. So for example, if someone is trying to go onto a new diet, they are wanting to lose weight and they're highly stressed, they are a caregiver, they are underslept, and they start this new diet, go all in, and they feel like they have to be all or nothing. And this is why they almost trip themselves up from the beginning, because what they need is something that is going to be sustainable and gradual, but instead they pick something extreme because they said, well, if I'm going to change it, I might as well change everything, which adds more stress into the fire because our bodies are built to habits and routines. Something new, it's something that we've got to think about, which is all quite stressful. Dieting itself is stressful. So if we are trying to do this all or nothing thinking isn't particularly helpful. And that's when they potentially overeat or emotionally eat. So they've had a really stressful week at work, they've been going all well, Friday's hit, they've had a rough day, long day, they're underslept, they have got an unexpected bill come through, and they turn to food to manage and self-soothe, and they think, sod it, I've ruined it now, what's the point? I might as well have everything in the cupboard, and their body is driving them towards those foods because they're highly stressed anyway. As you can see, it's a recipe for disaster, and this is why this doesn't just happen in a short window. This happens chronically over years and potentially decades, where people are repeating the cycle endlessly. And actually, it might not be the food that's the problem. It might not be the fact that you're not going to the gym. Actually, it's the fact that we need to manage how you handle stress. And stress is a funny one because often it's unavoidable. So like I said, we've got workloads, people have got children, we've got health issues, we've got finances, we've potentially got a caregiver for other people like parents. And a lot of that is outside of your control. And one of the things that I often harp on to my patients and clients about is controlling the controllables and looking at what we can manage or influence as well. So potentially we can't manage the workload. That just is what it is at the moment. But maybe we can control how we're turning up to work. So maybe potentially have a look at our sleep, or maybe we're not able to control everything within our diet if we're going out for food with friends, but we can plan ahead and control that a little bit more as well. So it's about looking at what is within our control, what's within our influence, not necessarily trying to say, well, let's get rid of all stresses. That'd be perfect if we could, but a lot of them in modern day aren't well, we can't control them. They're unavoidable, and we're not built for this chronic stress of just constant contact, work, emails, social media is probably a stressor for a lot of people as well. So this is where I look at sort of micro habits. I might call them foundational behaviors for some people, or some people might refer to them as like buffers. And these aren't the overhaul sexy things that you might see online where you have to do this 12-step routine every morning, or you go on a Zen retreat and go on a silent retreat or whatever for a week and that solves all your problems, because it rarely does, and that's inaccessible for a lot of people. So instead we need to look at things that are accessible, are within our control, and will actually help us manage the stresses that we can have some influence or control over. So the biggest one I'd say is around sleep. I probably said this quite a lot before, but I'm a poor sleeper, so something that I have to work really, really hard on is protecting my sleep. And this is where you might have to have some non-negotiables about certain things around your bedtime. One of the things that I'll probably do an episode on or a post on soon is around doing things that I don't particularly want to do. I do lots of things that I don't particularly want to do. One of them is going to bed early or having a strict bedtime routine. And that's really important to me. For some people, they can have a great night's sleep no matter what, but I really struggle at the best of times. And if I don't have these things in place, then my sleep's really poor, and I know it really impacts me for the next couple of days, up to a week or so. So being really protective over that is really important, especially if you're a poor sleeper. Things like having a bit of a wind down routine, giving yourself enough time between when you're trying to go to bed and when you need to get up. That is making sure you're hitting that 7.5 to 8.5 window, maybe a bit buffer depending on how well and how much sleep you actually need. Limiting screen time before bed, making sure your sleep environment's comfortable and not associated with any of the stresses like work. So trying to work elsewhere in the house if you are working from home, and trying to just have that work as a place of zen and rest and sleep recovery. Next up, I would say some elements of decompression. So you might find that it is some form of self-soothing or ways to help you switch off potentially from those stresses. So if it is work, then it might be going for a walk after work to signal to you, your body, mentally that, right, this is time to move and almost walk off the day at work, and then I can get into my evening. It might be that you have about 10-15 minutes in the morning, or even just a 5-minute journal, breathing routine, stretching routine in the morning to help give you a bit of me time for that day. And it isn't necessarily around the practice, it's about what it's signaling to you. And it's about putting yourself first and looking after yourself. And one of the common themes that I find with a lot of people that I work with is that they are really caring and compassionate people, but they're quite far down the list. Everyone else around them is really important. They are looking after lots of other people. They have lots of responsibilities, but the one responsibility that they're often neglecting is looking after themselves. So signaling to yourself that I'm going to have 5 minutes to myself in the morning if you can, or I'm going to exercise because I care about myself, is a really powerful thing, not just because of the exercise, not because of the action of journaling for 5 minutes, but it's about protecting time for you and putting yourself first, and that enables you to turn up for others better. So doing something like that is really important, something that I probably have as a foundational habit. It could be exercise, it could be social, it could be mindfulness, it could be just something that you enjoy that helps you switch off or gives you a bit of a break from the stresses that are in your modern day. Last but not least, obviously something around food would be quite useful because that's my bag really, and that's having simple, go-to, easy options for when stress is high. Having things that are simple, even day to day, just having decisions taken away from you, from future you. Like, for example, I was talking about my breakfast. My breakfast is pretty much the same on repeat every day. It's about 40 to 60 grams of oats, depending on how I'm feeling. It is half a pot of yogurt, of Greek style skyr yogurt. It'll be 160 grams of berries, potentially made the night before. If not, I'll make them in the morning. And I might put some vanilla flavor drops in there to sweeten up a little bit, but that's pretty much what I have. I enjoy it. It's pretty nice. Is it a nice thing in the world? Probably not, but it's pretty damn nice. It's pretty simple. It's pretty easy to make. It's pretty quick. But most importantly, it's a decision that I don't have to make for the whole week. It's my go-to. So finding options that tick lots of boxes, which are aligned with your goals, which are nutritious, which are easy to do, which are affordable and easy to repeat, and something that you don't have to think about because you're making lots and lots of decisions every day. I'm sure it's tens, if not hundreds of thousands of decisions every day you're making. So the more that we can take off your plate, the lower your stress is going to be, especially when you know those pre-made decisions are going to be aligned with what you want to achieve long term, which might be weight loss, might be a healthy diet, might be fueling for a run later, those sorts of things, and then copying those things throughout. But having things in, so I'm a big fan of having certain break glass meals in throughout the week. My favorite is pizza. I love pizza, so I make sure I have 1 to 2 frozen pizzas in the freezer that on nights where I'm back late or I can't be bothered, or we've forgotten to defrost the meat that we were going to have or whatever, then we just go, let's just have a pizza. And it is not the most nutritious meal in the world. It doesn't have to be, but it is a simple decision. It is made, something that I'm going to do and enjoy. It's something that is a better option than potentially what I'd have otherwise, or that would cause more stress further down the line. So that's where we look at these break glass options, and batch cooking can be another good option of this. If you're having a chili or a curry, for example, or whatever it is, and you can make 2 or 3 more portions you can chuck in the freezer, then they are your break glass options for nights when you can't be asked to cook, or you don't have time to cook, or you're busy, or things haven't gone to plan and you're looking for something last minute. I've already sorted it. It's in the freezer. I'm just going to defrost it. So looking at sleep, looking at some form of activity or way to self-care, and then looking at what we're putting into our bodies around the nutrition side of things and trying to reduce stress in these 3 areas can have a huge impact on how you manage moving forward, rather than reaching that point of overwhelm, breaking, relapsing, thinking, sod it, I might as well just eat everything in the cupboards, and then find yourself back at square one, if not worse. Actually, how we can manage the day-to-day stress with a few simple changes, a few things that are really going to support us, is much more proactive and much more sustainable long term. So that's today's episode. We've covered the relationship between stress, how modern day stress is different to what our body's potentially designed for. We've got appetite in there, we've got sleep, we've got coping mechanisms and sort of how emotional eating relates in there. But my main sort of message around this is that stress is often unavoidable. There's some things that we can manage around it, but a lot of it is unavoidable. So looking at how we manage that moving forward, the things that we can avoid, that we know are going to cause more stress. For example, for me, one stressor for me is, like I mentioned around sleep, would be consuming alcohol. Alcohol is something that I have enjoyed in the past. I haven't drank for a while because I know the detrimental impact it has on me and the stress it causes me afterwards. So I've made that decision not to have it. It's something that I could manage, and I do manage potentially at social occasions every now and then, but I choose not to have it a lot of the time because I know it's better for me moving forwards. That's just a decision I've made for me personally. So looking at what decisions you can make to help manage your stress a bit better, but also having a look at the habits and behaviors you can implement in there, especially around your sleep, especially around self-care and some form of activity or journaling or mindfulness or time just dedicated to you. And looking at the food aspect as well. What meals can you put on almost autopilot that are quite simple and easy that you can repeat throughout the week or have in the freezer when you need them, when you're highly stressed? If you're struggling for ideas, I share some every week on my social media, on my Instagram, TikTok and Facebook. I also have some recipe books on my website as well, Louis Padian Nutrition, so you can find some there. It's got a free meal plan. Definitely worth having a look on there, but they're really good examples of things that are really tasty, simple and easy to implement, and are great for times when you're highly stressed because they tick a lot of boxes and it's a decision that's easily made. So doing something like that can be really useful. Again, on the website, I've got a calorie calculator and a protein calculator that calculates how many calories you need to achieve your goals, not only throughout the day on average, but per meal as well, which is really useful. And then also, like I said, the meal plan on there is really useful as well. But if this is something that you're potentially struggling with, which a lot of people do struggle with, and no matter who I have a conversation with or which person sitting in front of me, stress plays part of that conversation, how we can manage it. So have a look at this and see if there's anything that you can implement moving forwards. If you need help with that, just send me a message, just reach out. I'm here to help. We can talk about how potentially I can support on that front, or if there's anything you can simply do right now, that could be a really easy fix. But if not, potentially you might need to work on it moving forward around your habits and behaviors, and that's something I can definitely support with. But for now, thank you very much for listening to today's episode, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.